Now, let's talk about President Joe Biden. He continues to make all sorts of interesting and often false claims. Last week, we brought you the uncle who was supposedly consumed by a cannibal in New Guinea, and that story was debunked in about 30 seconds. This time, he's making claims about driving an 18-wheeler.
Besides, I used to drive an 18-wheeler. You know what I do? That's exactly right.
Joe has not driven an 18-wheeler. I think that's just another little fantasy of his. But I wonder if these stories are designed to excite young voters, because there's not many showing up to the occasional rallies he holds. Let's look at the crowd that turned up at Hillsborough Community College on Tuesday in Tampa, Florida. There was like, I don't know, 20 of them there?
A handful.
It's a massive crowd right there, and the polls are showing, Drew, that Joe Biden is losing support amongst groups that he would expect to be backing the Democrats: Hispanic voters, Asian voters, increasingly young people too. What's behind that phenomenon?
Yeah, you know, I think, unfortunately, Biden and the Biden campaign have kind of thought that they could white-knuckle this election a little bit, right? They could just ride it out. And sure, maybe we don't have the best candidate. Maybe we don't have the most exciting candidate, but the usual folks will turn out. They understand the stakes of this election. It's him or Trump, and that's going to play. And I think that message hasn't resonated with real people, right? It's not resonating at his rallies. It's not resonating in the polls. And I think, you know, it's kind of lost on a lot of folks. I think it's lost on a lot of the people who live near I do here in Washington, D.C., that like people don't live and breathe this political stuff all the time, right? It's not enticing. It's not exciting. It's not going to get someone to show up or donate money or vote for a candidate, right? And so I think you would expect this sort of atrophying. But it's interesting because the Biden campaign doesn't seem to think that that's the case. They've almost got this entitlement about the sorts of voters who are going to show up and vote for their candidate, even if he's got all of these problems. And I mean, the last point you made about his maybe his memory or some of his cognitive function, I think that's the sort of thing that also scares away voters.
Oh, yes. He is not even the same candidate he was 4 years ago. And we thought he was pretty bad 4 years ago, hiding away in the basement. But when you watch speeches or interviews he gave then, the decline is stark. And when you watch him 20 years ago, because he has been in public life, 50 years, you can see that decline. And to try to blame things like stuttering or speech impediment, it ain't that. It's very clearly not that. Drew Holden, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Pleasure's mine. Thank you so much for having me, Rita.